Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at the entrance of Naval Station Coronado, watching the California sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. At 34 years old, she had spent the last 12 years proving herself in places most people only saw in movies. Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia. She had been there, done things she could never talk about, and earned every scar on her body and soul. But today was different. Today, she was coming home. The base looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she had just grown used to wider horizons and bigger dangers. Either way, this was her new assignment, training officer for the newest class of SEAL candidates. It was supposed to be a break, a chance to step back from the front lines and share what she had learned with the next generation. She adjusted the plain Navy uniform she wore, deliberately leaving off the rows of medals and ribbons that told her story. The orders from her commanding officer had been clear. Keep a low profile for the first week. Observe the current training environment. See how things really worked when nobody knew who was watching. Sarah picked up her simple duffel bag and walked through the gates. No fanfare, no welcome committee. Just another sailor reporting for duty. The training facility was a sprawling complex of obstacles courses, classroom buildings, and barracks. She had requested temporary quarters in the visitors section, away from the main instructor housing. Everything about her arrival was designed to be unremarkable. As she walked across the compound, a group of young cadets jogged past in formation. They looked so young, she thought. But then again, she had been that young once too, full of fire and determination, ready to prove she belonged in a world that did not always want her there. "Eyes front!" barked their instructor, a stocky man with a red face and a voice like gravel. Sarah watched them go, remembering her own training days. The exhaustion, the doubt, the moments when giving up seemed easier than taking one more step. She found her assigned quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a narrow window overlooking the obstacle course. Perfect. She could watch everything from here. After unpacking her few belongings, Sarah changed into civilian clothes, jeans, and a plain gray sweatshirt. She pulled her dark hair into a simple ponytail and looked at herself in the mirror. Without the uniform, without the symbols of rank and achievement, she looked like anyone else. That was exactly the point. The base cafeteria was busy when she arrived for dinner. She grabbed a tray and moved through the line, keeping her head down and her expression neutral. Around her, conversations flowed. Cadets complaining about training, instructors discussing the new class, administrative staff gossiping about upcoming inspections. Sarah found a table in the corner and ate in silence, listening to everything. "Did you see the new batch?" one instructor said at a nearby table. "Softer than the last group. I give half of them 2 weeks before they ring out." "Command keeps pushing these diversity quotas," another replied. "We're supposed to make everyone feel included now, as if warfare cares about feelings." Sarah kept her face blank, but her jaw tightened. She had heard it all before. She had lived it all before. After dinner, she took a walk around the base. The evening air was cool, carrying the salt smell of the ocean. She found herself at the obstacle course, now empty and quiet under the growing darkness. This was where it would all happen, where young men and women would discover what they were made of, where some would succeed and others would fail, where she would teach them the lessons she had learned the hard way. But first, she had to see how things really were. She had to understand the culture, the problems, the reality behind the official reports. Tomorrow, she would begin her observation. Tomorrow, she would see if the Navy had changed as much as it claimed, or if some battles still needed. The next morning arrived with the harsh sound of reveille echoing across the base. Sarah was already awake, dressed in her civilian workout clothes, a plain black t-shirt and shorts. She had decided to use the base gym, another place where she could observe without drawing attention. The facility was crowded with early risers. Cadets pumped iron and ran on treadmills, trying to build the strength they would need for the grueling weeks ahead. Instructors worked out too. maintaining the physical standards they demanded from their students. Sarah claimed a corner spot and began her routine. Years of training had made her strong in ways that did not always show. She was not the biggest person in the room, but she could outlift, outrun, and outlast most of them. She had learned long ago that survival was not about size. It was about will. "Excuse me, miss?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah turned to see a young cadet, maybe 22, with a friendly smile. "You new on base? I haven't seen you around." "Just got here," Sarah said simply. "Civilian contractor?" he asked. "Something like that." The young man nodded. "Well, welcome to Coronado. I'm Cadet Morrison. If you need anything." "Morrison!" A harsh voice cut through the gym. "Get your head out of the clouds and finish your workout." The instructor who had yelled was the same red-faced man Sarah had seen the day before. Chief Instructor Briggs, according to the name tape on his shirt. Morrison hurried away with an apologetic glance. Briggs walked over, crossing his arms as he looked Sarah up and down. "Civilians are supposed to use the other gym. This one's for Navy personnel." "I am Navy personnel," Sarah said calmly. Briggs raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What's your rate?" Sarah could have ended this conversation with 3 words: Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. But her orders were to observe, not to reveal herself. Not yet. "I work in administration," she said instead. Administration. Briggs smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Well, admin, try to stay out of the way. Wouldn't want you to get hurt around the real sailors." He walked away, leaving Sarah to finish her workout. She noted everything: his attitude, his assumptions, the way he had dismissed her without a second thought. This was exactly what she had come to see. Later that morning, Sarah positioned herself near the outdoor training area. The new cadet class was running the obstacle course, and she wanted to watch them in action. Most of the cadets were young men, but there were 3 women in the group. Sarah focused on them particularly, watching how they tackled each challenge and how the instructors responded. One of the women, dark-haired and determined, struggled with the rope climb. She made it halfway up, arms shaking with effort, before she had to drop back down. "Pathetic," Briggs shouted. "My grandmother could climb faster than that, and she's been dead for 10 years. The female cadet's face flushed red, but she got back in line to try again. "She doesn't have the upper body strength," another instructor commented, loud enough for everyone to hear. "None of them do. It's just biology." Sarah's hands clenched. She had heard the same thing during her own training. She had proved it wrong then, just as these women would prove it wrong now, if they were given a fair chance. The morning wore on. The cadets ran, climbed, crawled through mud, and carried heavy packs across long distances. Sarah watched it all, making mental notes about the training methods, the encouragement, or lack of it, and the overall atmosphere. Around noon, the cadets were dismissed for lunch. Sarah followed them to the cafeteria, staying far enough behind to remain unnoticed. Inside, she grabbed a sandwich and found a seat where she could observe. The 3 female cadets sat together, talking in low voices. "I thought it would be hard, but not like this," one of them said. "Briggs acts like he wants us to fail." "Because he does," the dark-haired woman replied. "Did you hear what he said yesterday? That women should stick to nursing and admin work." "Maybe he's right," the third woman said quietly. "Maybe we're not cut out for this." "Don't say that," the dark-haired cadet snapped. "We're as good as any man here. We just have to prove it." Sarah felt a surge of recognition. She had sat at a table just like this once, having almost the exact same conversation. The doubt, the determination, the knowledge that they were fighting 2 battles, one against the training and one against the people who did not believe they belonged. She wanted to walk over and tell them it would be okay, that they could do this, that she was proof of what was possible, but not yet. Her mission was to observe first, to understand the full scope of the problem before she could fix it. As she finished her lunch and prepared to leave, Sarah overheard Briggs talking to another instructor near the exit. "Give it another week," Briggs said. "The women will quit. They always do. And then we can get back to training real SEALs." Sarah walked past them without a word, her face carefully neutral. But inside, a fire was building. By the third day of her observation, Sarah had seen enough. The pattern was clear. The female cadets were being held to different standards, criticized more harshly, and given less support than their male counterparts. It was not blatant enough to document easily, but it was there in 1,000 small ways. The dismissive comments, the lack of encouragement, the assumption that failure was inevitable. She had filled 3 notebooks with observations and was ready to start making changes. But first, she needed to complete her week of anonymous observation. That afternoon, Sarah decided to explore the areas of the base she had not yet seen. She walked past the administrative buildings, the medical facility, and finally arrived at the equipment warehouse where training gear was stored and maintained. The building was quiet, most personnel busy with afternoon training sessions. Sarah walked through the aisles of ropes, weights, and other equipment, checking inventory and quality. Years of experience had taught her that good equipment could mean the difference between success and failure in training, and life and death in the field. "Hey, what are you doing in here?" Sarah turned to see 4 cadets approaching. They were not from the new class. These looked like second-year trainees, young men who had made it through basic SEAL training and were now in the advanced program. They had the swagger that came with that accomplishment. "Just looking around," Sarah said calmly. "This area is restricted," the tallest one said. He had the build of a football player and the attitude to match. His name tape read, "Patterson. Civilians aren't allowed without an escort." "I'm not a civilian," Sarah replied. "Oh, really?" Another cadet, shorter but with mean eyes, stepped closer. "What are you then? Some admiral's wife who thinks she can go wherever she wants?" The other cadets laughed. Sarah recognized the dynamic immediately. Young men showing off for each other, using her as an opportunity to demonstrate their dominance. "I work here," Sarah said, keeping her voice level, "and you should probably get back to your duties." "You work here," Patterson repeated, his voice mocking. "Doing what? Making coffee? Filing papers?" Sarah had been in tighter spots than this. She had faced enemy soldiers with actual weapons, not just verbal ones. These boys were annoying, but they were not a threat. Still, she was curious to see how far they would push. "I think you should leave," the mean-eyed cadet said, moving to block her path. "Before we report you for trespassing." "Report me to who?" Sarah asked. "Your instructors?" "That's right," Patterson said. "We've got friends in high places. We're the elite around here, and you—" He looked her up and down with open contempt. "You're nobody." The 4 cadets formed a loose circle around her now, trying to intimidate her with their presence. Sarah calculated angles and distances out of pure habit. If this turned physical, she could have all 4 of them on the ground in under 20 seconds. But that would blow her cover. And more importantly, it would not teach them the lesson they needed to learn. "Look," Sarah said, injecting a note of uncertainty into her voice. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll just go." She moved toward the gap in their circle, playing the role they expected, a frightened woman backing down. Patterson grabbed her arm. "Not so fast. I think you need to apologize first, for wasting our time." Sarah looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Let go." "Or what?" He squeezed harder, trying to make her flinch. This was the moment. Sarah could feel it. The moment where she had to make a choice, maintain her cover or teach these boys that underestimating someone could be a serious mistake. Before she could decide, a voice rang out from the warehouse entrance. "Patterson, what the hell is going on here?" The cadets immediately stepped back. Sarah turned to see Chief Instructor Briggs striding toward them, his face red with anger. "Sir!" Patterson released Sarah's arm and stood at attention. "We found this civilian in a restricted area. We were escorting her out." Briggs looked at Sarah, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You again, the admin worker who can't follow basic rules." "I was just," Sarah began. "I don't care what you were doing," Briggs interrupted. "You four, get back to training. And you," he pointed at Sarah. "My office, now. We need to discuss whether you should be on this base at all." The cadets filed out, Patterson shooting Sarah a satisfied smirk as he passed. Briggs gestured for her to follow him, and Sarah complied. As they walked across the compound toward the administrative building, Sarah felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She could continue playing this role, observing from the shadows, or she could reveal who she really was and start making changes immediately. The problem was, if she revealed herself now, she would never know how bad things really got when nobody was watching. She would never see the full truth of what these cadets, and especially the female cadets, were facing. But if she waited, how much worse might things become? Briggs led her into a small office and shut the door. He sat behind his desk and gestured to the chair across from him. "I've been patient," he said, "but you're becoming a problem. I'm going to need to see your credentials and understand exactly what you're doing on my base." Sarah met his eyes. This was it. The moment of truth. She reached into her pocket. Sarah pulled out her military identification card and placed it on Briggs's desk. She watched his face as he picked it up, his expression moving from annoyance to confusion to shock in the space of 3 seconds. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell," she said quietly. "Navy SEAL, Special Operations, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart. I've been operating overseas for the past 12 years, and as of this week, I'm your new commanding officer for training operations." The color drained from Briggs's face. He looked at the ID card, then at her, then back at the card. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "You've been here since Monday?" he finally managed. "That's correct. I was ordered to observe training operations for 1 week before officially taking command, to get a sense of how things really work." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "And I've seen quite a bit." Briggs set the ID card down carefully, as if it might explode. "Ma'am, if I had known—" "That's exactly the point, Chief Briggs. You didn't know, so you treated me the way you treat anyone you perceive as weak or inferior." Sarah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "The way you treat the female cadets, the way you let others treat them." "Ma'am, with all due respect, don't." Sarah held up a hand. "I've spent 3 days watching. I've taken notes. I've seen the comments, the double standards, the atmosphere of hostility toward women in this program. And I've seen you, specifically, contribute to that atmosphere." Briggs's jaw tightened. "Those women are held to the same standards as the men." "Are they?" "Because from what I observed, they're criticized more harshly for the same mistakes. They receive less instruction and less encouragement, and they're subjected to commentary about their capabilities based solely on their gender." Sarah pulled out one of her notebooks. "I have documentation, times, dates, specific incidents." The office fell silent. Briggs stared at his desk, his face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Now we make changes," Sarah said, "starting immediately. Tomorrow morning I take official command. You will introduce me to the training staff and the cadets, and then we will have a very long meeting about training protocols, equal opportunity, and what it actually means to prepare the best possible SEALs for service." Briggs nodded stiffly. "Yes, ma'am."